Hi and welcome to this cabin/October book haul. In this video I'm going to go through the books I've bought this month, and as per usual it's too many, but that's the way I like it. This month I've actually thrifted all the books except for one book, and I'm really happy about that. The society is opening again and the book markets are also. I've never really visited a book market before, but this month I've visited two. And that's a real joy, thinking that you're backing up an organization you might really like. The fun thing about going to book markets or thrifting in general is that you never know what you're gonna get. If you order books online, you always know what you're getting in the mail, and that's kind of boring sometimes, I think. I also like that the books have a history and people often write things in the books, which I really enjoy. And I make up stories in my mind, which just adds to the experience of the reading, of course. I thought we would start with the one book that I have not thrifted this month, and of course this is Bewilderment by Richard Powers. I made a review of this book, which I published earlier this week, and the story is about a young boy and his father who loses the spouse and mother, and they're sort of trying to find their way back to normality, which is very hard. The boy struggles with anger issues and the doctor wants to diagnose him, but the father doesn't. And so the adventure begins. During this process, they're trying to retrain the boy's brain on the pattern of his mother's earlier scans. It's an interesting book that I urge you to check out my review of course. It has its sides, both positive and negative, and I thought it was okay in general. This is of course a book that I read for my upcoming Booker Prize video and in sort of reading prize winners mission in my book reading life. This book came out this year and is the newest of the bunch, and I'm sort of happy I read it. But that's the first purchase and only one that isn't thrifted, at least. My next book describes both me and my relationship to the author that has written the book. It came out in 1868 and it's The Idiot by Fyodor Dostoevsky. For those who have followed my channel, you know that my relationship to this author is kind of strained. I read The Brothers Karamazov and made a video about it. I struggle a bit with the writer and how he writes. And of course, The Idiot is a huge classic as well. I think I'll put this book in the category for when I'm old and grumpy, because I feel like it deserves a place there. And that's, of course, without having read it. I tried reading a summary of this book, but it was so long and complicated that I just gave up. I struggle a bit when the books are too philosophical. And of course, Dostoevsky is the master of these kinds of things. Then again, this might be one of the books that I have to read if I'm going to be an accomplished reader. Still struggling with idiotic thoughts. That's why this book fits me so well. I have like 40 or 50 years before I feel like I should have read it. And I wouldn't have bought it unless I could feel that I was supporting my local marching band. So there's that. If some of you have read this book, please tell me if it's worth it. And what to expect, because I struggle a bit when I try to read the description. The next book on the list is a book that had just kept appearing, and it's been on my TBR ever since I started this project, and that is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. This is released in 2004, and what amazes me is that a book of this size, it's almost 900 pages, is so highly rated and so popular. But I've read a lot of places where people tell me that you might think it's big, but you won't feel like it's big when you read it. And that surely is a good sign that it's a real page turner. It's supposed to be a very enchanting tale about the re-emerging of magic in England in the 1800s. And if I understand it correctly, Mr. Norrell and Jonathan Strange is supposed to be competitors in this magical world. And the book is said to mix both fiction and historic events and historical places. So that is a thing that I really can enjoy. And I recently also bought Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, which I've found to have a very intriguing plot. So I think me and this author will have a happy future together. The next book is Tollak to Ingeborg. This is a book by Norwegian author Renberg. Came out in 2020. This is a very famous Norwegian author, and a lot of his books have been filmatized in some way. And I watched a couple of movies which I really enjoyed, but I have not read his books yet. This is one of my mother's favorite authors, and of course I've been a bit skeptical. Just kidding. I think this will be a very good book. Tollak and Ingeborg are two Norwegian names. Two in this meaning means that Tollak is sort of Ingeborg's husband. Not that he belongs to her, but it's just those two belong together. It's like speaking about Tollak in the third person. Tollak lives in a small place without his family, and the family rarely visits. The town knows that Tollak has done some terrible things, but it's now time for Tollak to tell them the real story. People have described this as a very gruesome book, and I think it will be heartbreaking. I actually found the cliffhanger very, very intriguing, so I think this will be one of the books that I'm going to read soon. It has been all over my Instagram for the last year, and I think it's a good reason for that. My mom says that he writes in an exceptional way, and the story seems like a story I could not enjoy, but want to read, so we'll just have to read it. Then we have books that I've also talked about earlier on my YouTube channel, and I've been quite lucky with this thrift shopping this time. It's Middlemarch by George Elliot. These two are books about society in England in the 1800s and discusses a lot of how it is living there and politics and it all. Also have to say I really enjoyed these two colors for the books. Seems so neat. Too bad I've just ruined it a bit. This is of course a book that I think I will enjoy a lot, both the historical aspect and get an insight in how it was living at that time, so going to be read at some point. Then we have a book that was not on my to be read list, but I saw it and thought that might not be a bad idea. And that is Matt Haig's The Humans. I read Midnight Library of course, and I enjoyed the reading. The book was okay, but I sort of just fell in love with the reading process. If I'm in a slump again, I think this will be one of the books I'm going to read to get me out of it. And when I started reading about this book is supposed to be very good as well. And it's supposed to be more funny than Midnight Library, which I could need more of. This will be my entertaining book, I think. Will it deliver? We don't know. But if it does, Matt Haig has a bright future with me. On the other hand, a book that might not have a bright future with me is The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann, released in 1924. This is a book I've also talked a little bit about before, and I've talked about it in a way that I tried to conclude with myself that I'm not going to read it. But this also keeps appearing. So at some point I have to give up and just read it. It's supposed to be a formative as well as a novel of ideas. Thomas Mann won the Nobel Prize for Literature, which is supposed to mean a lot. But that can also mean that the book is kind of tough to get through. In the book we meet a young man in the Swiss Alps in a sanatorium, and the year is 1914. Of course, a very bad year for humankind. And at this sanatorium, the young man meets a bunch of people and discuss religion, politics, sexuality, love. And this is why it's a formative novel. This is a book I might really, really hate or really love. Maybe I'll read Death in Venice first. A book that I think I will love is Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere. And this is the author's preferred text, which is my first book of any sorts that is a author's preferred text, and which I didn't notice before I bought it and read the prologue, which explains why this is a preferred text. For those who follow my channel, you know that I'm really starting to fall in love with Neil Gaiman's writing, and this book seems to not be an exception. I started reading this book now, and from the first page is sort of a laid back language which is very, very funny, just makes me a happier person. So this is one of the books that I've just started reading, and it's such a joy to just pick the book up. And there's not that many books that I have the same feeling with, not in the same way at least. It's just how the people are down to earth in a way. Even though I started reading this book, I don't know much about it, just that it's London just beneath the ground. And we meet a guy that, how should I explain this? I had the same feeling when I read Anansi Boys. It's just a hopeless man. I hope he'll pick himself up at some point, but for now he's kind of hopeless. I've only read about 50 pages so far, but this will be an enjoyable read. It already is. I don't know if this is something you also think, but if an author that you enjoy have a preferred text, I would think that that book will be better than the original that got published. Then a book that I bought only for the cover, and that's Omars Iliad. I don't know how to pronounce it, but released approximately 730 before Christ. The action is set to 900 to 800 before Christ and around the Trojan War. The Iliad and the Odyssey is two books that belongs together, and I sort of always thought that I would read one of them. Of course, it's very interesting to read about the time that's so different that I can't really fathom how it's like living there. And it will look great in my shelf. Maybe the most vain book in the bunch this time. I was also lucky to find one other book that was released by a Norwegian author in 2020, and that's Zeshan Shakar's Yellow Book. I actually don't know if this book is called Yellow Book in English, but it's called Gul Bok in Norwegian, which means Yellow Book. Zeshan Shakar appeared on the Norwegian book market suddenly in 2017 with a book called Tante Ulrikkes Vei, and that's where he grew up. A book about growing up in a place in Oslo, which not many people have written books about. And that book is supposed to be phenomenal. I haven't read it so far, but a lot of Norwegians have. And so this is the second book of his. The plot for this book actually sounds very boring, and it's about a young man who is an economist, and he gets a job in a department in Norway, and he works on the state budget. The man just wants to earn a lot of money and work in private sector, but is now stuck working on the state budget. And in this process, he learns about what the politicians really want and what is the reality. And the book is based on this plot. I also think we will get to see a lot of Oslo in this book and how it's like being a young man in Oslo. This author, of course, also is known for writing in a good way. And this book has also gotten a lot of praise, not as much as the other one. But if you get praise for writing about the state's budget, you should get a medal of some sorts. And that's from a person that sort of enjoys politics. I have this friend that tells me that I only read boring books. And I thought, okay, so what books should I read? If every book I read now is boring, what's not boring? And so she told me that this book is not boring. This is her favorite book, Use of Weapons by Iain M. Released in 1990. It's a sci-fi novel, which I know nothing about. I told her I would read it because then we could argue afterwards. If I love it, I've read a book I love. If I hate it, I can tell her that she has bad taste in books. I would gain so much. I actually tried to read what it's about, but I couldn't fathom anything of the plot. So this will be one of the books I read in spite. Then we have a book that is no reason for me buying. That's The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway, released in 1926. I've read Farewell to Arms, which was okay, and I read The Old Man and the Sea, that was not okay. Why did I buy this? Well, now the marching band can afford 1/4 of a drumstick. It's about a couple that meets in Paris in the 1920s, and it's supposed to be an impossible love story. I think if I'm in the mood to read this book someday, I think people around me should be very afraid because I can't really see myself reading this book. And then we have come to the last book, and a book I think I will really enjoy, and that's Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, released in 1939. I grew up watching a lot of Poirot's mysteries on TV when I was a kid during Easter, as all Norwegians do. It's about 10 strangers in a mansion on a lonely island, and they don't know each other, but they all have a secret, and suddenly a murder happens, and then they are 9. And then there are 8. I think I will really enjoy this book. I like mystery on television, so I might like reading about mysteries. And the good thing about this is that if I like this novel, Agatha Christie has written around 1 million, so I can spend my time reading a lot of her stuff if this one is a classic for me as well as the rest of the world. So that's it. We have finished. These are the books I bought in October. Of course, too many. Way too many. But I enjoy it. And as I said, the marching band will be able to march on. The Norwegian marching bands aren't really marching that much. They sit and play for the most part. But I enjoy it. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have recommendations for books, as always, I would enjoy if you comment below. If you know that some of these books might not be for me, just give me a heads up and I will take that into consideration. And subscribe to my channel if you want to. And I'll see you next time. Bye!